see you guys in the dark.
My local internet cafe is not much of a sight to behold. I think that's what may have contributed to it shutting down for a couple months back in June. The exterior was reminiscent of an abandoned shack, with its appearance and broken windows. However, after they cleaned up the inside, I definitely saw some improvement. Sparkly clean tile floors and beautiful mahogany countertops filled the cafe with a sense of ease and elegance. I always got plenty of work done in there, so the shop's grungy look never bothered me so much. But it was nice to have a change of scenery once the cleanup was done. I was probably the only one regularly at the cafe, venturing in on almost a daily basis. Plenty of other folks cycled in and out, but nary a familiar face would show up. This was fine, since I only went there to edit my vlogs and website on occasions. Striking up a conversation with someone recognizable was not on the agenda, ever. I was there for some much-needed peace and quiet, not small talk. Though I had Wi-Fi at home, the thin walls there did little to muffle my father's drunken ramblings. The cafe was my escape from the unwanted noise. I strolled in on a Saturday morning, just 5 days after the grand reopening. I was feeling pretty groggy, still recovering from a cold I caught during the week. The humid August air didn't help matters. Because of this, I decided to grab a coffee before getting my things set up. I walked across the glimmering, newly placed floors and heard them squeak under my sneakers. I laughed a little to myself, almost tempted to start turning in place just to hear the sound a few more times. No, I told myself, you gotta grow up sometime. I ordered my coffee and took a look around the room while I waited for it. I took a mental note of how many faces were in the cafe with me. I was surely going to grab a quiet little table in the corner, away from these strangers. Small iced regular, the barista held out my coffee and straw. Thanks, I said plainly. I threw down a couple of quarters as a tip and strolled on over to a table I wanted. I spent the next few hours clipping and splicing my videos from the days previous. I was doing a week-long series about the gym I go to. Basically workout tips and some comedy bits with my buddy Jake, who works the front desk. I found myself laughing out loud over a protein skit he had done. I have drawn some attention to my little corner of the room. Though the staring eventually subsided, I felt it best for me to leave, as I had been there much longer than usual. I reached down and unplugged my laptop charger, and that's when my hand brushed up against something. Confused, I took a look under my table to investigate. A 16-inch black bag sat there, just where my feet were settled. It had pockets and a shoulder strap, as well as an abundance of dust coating the leather. Holy crap, I thought to myself. Someone must have left their laptop behind or something. At first, I was going to do the right thing. I very easily could have handed it to the barista and called it a day. I guess maybe that would have been the smart thing to do. However, a mixture of curiosity and stupidity came over me, keeping me from being honest. Instead, after packing up my own things, I swung the mystery bag over my shoulder and swiftly exited the cafe. Stupid. I pulled into my driveway about noon, the hot summer sun beaming down on my front lawn. My father was doing his usual half-assed inspection of the plants in the garden, beer can in his hand. I tried to get into the house without a word of him, but he stopped me just as I opened the storm door. Hey, why are you in such a hurry?" he asked, taking a swig of his drink. "Dad, I don't have time. Important website business, you know." Well, he slurred. "Don't stop on my account." "But you just stopped me," I thought to myself. I pushed through the front door, passing my sleeping mother on the couch, and darted upstairs to my room. Slam! I shut my door hard behind me and locked it immediately. I tossed my belongings and newly found goods onto my bed and kicked my shoes clear across the room. I was excited to dig into this lucky haul. Carefully and slowly, I unzipped the top of the bag and pulled it open. I gasped a little to myself. Despite the appearance of the bag, the contents were no joke. A shiny, brand new looking laptop was nestled nicely inside. I pulled it out and observed it with awe. I was certainly nicer than my basic 500 gig HP with a big box store. I couldn't believe what I was holding. I flipped it open and began feeling the keys and the monitor. It was in mint condition. I had to be the luckiest guy in the world. Everything was there, including a charger and a wireless mouse. I even found a bag of screen wipes at the bottom. I also dug into the pockets, curious as to what treasure I might find in there. What I found was a cell phone. Nothing special. Just some cheap Android phone. It was still powered on and had no screen lock on it. Exploring it further, I noticed there were no texts and only one recent call to an out-of-state number. Being into electronics, I went into the settings to see what kind of operating system it had. It was vastly out of date on software, still set in some variation of the Lollipop operating system. That's all right, I thought. I could still flip it for a quick $10 or so. I placed it on the bed next to the laptop and sat for a moment, trying to take in what I had found in front of me. This was such a great find, but I needed to power on the laptop and figure out what I was working with. To my excitement, there was no login screen. I was in immediately after booting it up. I was never into laptops as I was phones, but I could tell right away I was not working with your standard stock operating system. This thing resembled more of a modded setup that I had seen kids working with back in high school, but I couldn't name it off the top of my head. Luckily, it was simple enough to navigate. I set it up with my Wi-Fi and dived right into the file storage to get some idea of whose computer I had. I was disappointed for just a few minutes, but after clicking around a bit, I did find a folder labeled A. Inside was one JPEG, titled 1 by 1. Intrigued, my stomach did a little flip as I opened the image. I was puzzled by what I found. It was a screenshot from a website. It looked like a post from some forum, from a user named Anon and 4, with nothing but phone numbers listed and 0 replies. Underneath the list was the tagline, "You know who you are." Scanning the image for answers, I noticed the address bar for the site. It seems to be a nonsense string of characters followed by a .onion extension. Onion? Wasn't that a parody news site or something? I wasn't too sure, but I decided to dig it up. I clicked on the X at the top, taking me back to the desktop. That's when I noticed another file. This one was labeled Pics, which stirred up some more thrills in my bones. Yes, I cheered to myself. This could be more likely to reveal the owner's identity. I became disappointed as I clicked through the pictures. There was no human life, just shots of different places and scenery. This included the image of a dark barber shop, a path in the woods somewhere, and even someone's garage. What really caught my eye was the last picture. It was the cafe. My stomach started doing acrobatics now. My heart was racing. Why were there random pictures in this thing? Why was there a screenshot of a message board with a list of phone numbers? The files just weren't adding up for me, but I hatched a half-baked plan. I didn't know if it was going to end the mystery, but I couldn't help but pry. I pulled up the pic with the phone numbers, grabbed the Android phone, and dialed the first number on the top of the list. After only 2 rings, I was greeted with silence. Strange, I thought, but I pressed on. I dialed the next number on the list. This time, it rang 5 times before I got a generic inbox greeting with the phone number listed. Interesting, but I hung up before I heard the beep. I grew bored of dialing random numbers. I decided to take a break and put the laptop and cell phone away for a little while. I knew I'd come back to it later. Once the evening rolled around, I waited for my parents to go to bed and then fixed myself up a snack. This was pretty much a nightly routine of mine. I clicked on the TV as I usually did and settled on the first news channel I scrolled to. This is when things took a turn for the weird. A breaking news story was displayed on screen, one from the next town over. Young barber age 25, found murdered at work. Damn, I shook my head. That sucks. A female news reporter was on the scene, outside of the barber shop where it took place. Wait a second. I couldn't believe my eyes. That barber shop. It was the same one from the pic on the laptop. I was sure of it. I put my plate down on the coffee table and raced upstairs to grab the computer. I booted it up, clicked on the folder of pictures, and then the photo in question. I ran back downstairs with the laptop in hand and held it up to the TV screen. Yes, it was definitely the same barber shop. Wow, what were the chances of that? I was shaking my head in amazement. I finished watching the news story and began feeling tired. I was about ready for bed, so I grabbed my remote. The news story just after grabbed it my attention before I could hit the power button. Cold murder in local forest. This was also nearby, just over the bridge in the opposite direction. This world is terrible, I thought. I hadn't seen two stories like that back to back in a long time. That's when it hit me. I scrolled over the picture of the woods in the same folder. Then I waited to see if the news story included the location of the homicide on video. Though I didn't get anything solid to compare it to, I was definitely getting weird vibes. First a barbershop, and now a forest? I had to be grasping at straws. I decided it was bedtime. I had a pretty restless night of sleep, tossing and turning and kicking my covers to the foot of my bed. It was hot and humid, and I kept waking up with the sweats. Needless to say, I was in dire need of coffee the next morning. I was probably smart to leave the strange laptop at home, grabbing my own equipment as I headed out the door. I drove rather quickly to the cafe, eyelids still very heavy. I got my regular coffee and sat down at my favorite booth in the corner. Only one other person resided in the building apart from the baristas at work. It was nice and quiet and felt peaceful. A good contrast from my evening snack and sweaty night of interrupted rest. Still, my mind couldn't help but wander. The web address from the screenshot I found came rolling into the forefront of my thoughts. What was that onion domain all about? Why did the web address make no sense? It was something like code influx, with random numbers and symbols after it. This was meaningless to me. I decided to do some research. I couldn't recall the exact website, but I remembered the .onion extension, so I started from there. I was immediately blown away. Apparently, what it pertains to is web addresses not reachable on normal servers. It takes you through something called Tor and is used for some pretty shady activity. I guess it involves what's called the dark web. I'd heard a little bit about this before. I was beginning to feel sick. The website listed on the wiki were pretty revolting, to say the least. Nothing I would ever want to be involved in. The worst part? I was beginning to think the laptop I found was used solely to access this part of the internet. I couldn't bear the thought of being in possession of it any longer. I had to do something. I stormed out of the cafe, ready to spring into action, when I was stopped by a tap on my leg. I looked down to see a homeless-looking man in a black tattered leather jacket sitting up against the front of the building. His face looked rough, complete with a badly shaven beard and cracked lips. He looked miserable. He held out a small plastic cup, looking up at me with desperation in his eyes. "Spare change, sir?" "I'm in a hurry, dude. I don't carry cash." "Please," he begs me some more. He reached out and grabbed my pant leg. "No, get away from me." I kicked his hand away immediately. The guy looked upset. His eyes were actually watering a little bit. I felt a little bad, but damn, don't grab me like that. That's when the guy did the strangest thing. He took out a phone and started taking pictures of me. "What are you doing now?" I asked, confused as all hell. He didn't answer. All I could do about it was run to my car and leave as fast as possible. What was that guy's deal? I called my friend Peter on the way home. I knew he would have some more insight on this whole thing. I was hoping I could bring him to my house and have him wipe the computer clean. Then I could sell it to a random Yahoo and be done with this whole misadventure. Once I picked up my friend, I sped back to my house and showed him what I found in the cafe. He was blown away. "This thing is lethal," he laughed. "It looked pretty customized, honestly." "Yeah, I noticed that, but take a look at these." I clicked through the photos, showing him the ones that I compared with the news story. "So, you think this laptop has some sort of connection to the murders?" "I don't know, man, but I think there's something fishy going on." He shrugged and took over the mouse for a moment. "Where's the picture of the phone numbers?" "It's somewhere in the file storage." "Yep, click there and bingo." Peter stared intently at the list and address bars in the shot. He also checked the file description and saw that the screenshot originated from a laptop. So it was taken from within the device. My hairs were at attention, all up and down my skin. "So, you tested these numbers out?" "Yeah, with this phone." I handed him the cell phone that came in the bag with the laptop, and he scanned through it rapidly. Definitely a track phone. Something bought as a burner, I guess. Possibly for some sort of business task. "Shall we try another phone number?" I nodded and pointed to the one just below the numbers I tested out. He dialed it in and threw it on a speakerphone so we could both listen in. It rang and rang. It didn't stop ringing, so we hung up after the 8th ring. Peter looked at the phone funny and then up at me. "I don't know what's up with all of this. Did you want me to just factory reset everything?" "Yeah, I mean, is that going to take care of my problem?" "Not sure, but I think I'd like to have some fun with this before I call it a day." I gave him a look, a glance of disagreement. I didn't think that would be in our best interest. I don't think we should be messing with this dude. Come on, what could go wrong? You could even film it. This could go viral. "Well, I'm not going to vlog me hanging around with a stolen laptop. Just do what you gotta do with it, and let's move on." Peter smirked, looked at the screen again, and then dialed another number from the list. Again, he got nothing. This time, just another generic voicemail box greeting. He continued on to the next phone number, and halfway through dialing, he stopped. His eyes were scanning the screen. His face was now white as a ghost. "What? Why did you stop? Are you okay?" This is my phone number." My heart panged like a club on a gong. That can't be right. I scooted over next to Peter and observed the screen. He was right. Just to be sure, he finished dialing and hit send. He put the phone up to his ear and waited. Just as he suspected, his pocket lit up, and his ringtone sang away. We both looked at each other in shock. "Dude," my hands were shaking, and my mouth was agape so far. I think my jaw was brushing my bed sheets. "How?" is all Peter could muster up from his racing thoughts. "This is unreal. I don't like this at all. Just wipe the hard drive and let's be done with it." "Wait," he shouted while looking at the screen again. My heart sank some more. I had a feeling about what he was going to say. "What? Don't tell me." He didn't say a word. All he did was start frantically dialing another number. That's when I felt it. My pocket was now vibrating. I gulped so loud that I flinched. I reached down and pulled out my phone and answered. I held it up to my ear. "Peter," I said through the receiver, looking at my visibly shaken friend across from me. "This is messed up," he responded through the burner phone. I ended up driving Peter home shortly after. He had handed the phone over and told me he wanted to leave and take everything in. He left the laptop with me and told me he'd rather not mess with it. We decided to meet up at the cafe and drop it back off right in the morning. We'd wake up early and hopefully be the first ones in. However, I missed my alarm. Apparently, I also missed 10 calls from Peter. I opened up my messages and noticed the 4 text messages that he sent. Damn, I had to get going and fast. I had already packed up everything the night before, so all I had to do was throw on a t-shirt and shorts and head to the cafe. As I turned the corner to where the cafe was, I had to hit the brakes pretty quickly. What I saw on that road was nothing but cops and ambulances. There were roads blocked up on either side of the ambulances, and the cafe was barricaded. What in the... I was thinking out loud. This was crazy. There were people with their hands on their faces, looking scared and sad. I pulled over into the grocery store parking lot across the street, and then walked over to the scene to get a closer look. I assumed Peter was doing the same thing. I ended up in a crowd of onlookers next door, looking at the scene before us. There was blood splatter on the front of the doors of the cafe and some papers, among other belongings strewn all about. More blood covered the ground. Jesus, this was a damn massacre. I could hear the people beside me whispering to each other about what was going on. They're talking about a possible serial killer, one woman said to her friend. The kid was about to walk in, and suddenly bullets came in from all over. Nobody saw who fired the shots. A guy filled his wife in about what he witnessed. I was too curious to just be craning my neck from back there. I needed a closer look. I peered over at the cops who were busy questioning a barista by the ambulances. I crept past the barricade carefully. I slipped past a couple other baristas and made my way to a second ambulance by the other barricade. The stretcher was in view now, but I couldn't tell who was in it. I decided to kneel down beside the ambulance and hopefully catch some conversation between the EMTs. I took out my phone and started recording. We lost him. He wasn't hanging in there much when we got here, but I was hoping for him. Jan, it's not your fault. You saved the girl. You can't save them all, you know. I wish I could. I heard him talk before he let go, you know. He told me his name was Peter. My hand jumped over my mouth as I let out the weirdest sound. It was a gasp, combined with a grunt of disbelief. No, it couldn't be. Yeah, the other EMT said. We gave his information already. Guess he was an IT guy for a local business. Smart kid, early 20s, I guess. I stumbled back a bit on my heels, dropped my phone in the process. I bumped into something solid behind me and stood up quickly. I turned around and saw that same homeless guy from the other day. My face was still contorted from the information I just received from my eavesdropping. The guy was just staring at me, stoic. He didn't even react to me bumping into him. He was glaring at me from behind, an unchanging expression. I couldn't help it. I booked it across the street to my car. I could feel tears forming in my ducts, eyes twitching in the wind from the open driver's side window. Why did I have to wake up so late? Maybe Peter could have been spared from whatever this was. A drive-by? An assassination of some kind? My head was dizzy. My heart was hurting, and I was beginning to make some connection. The pictures on the computer, the phone numbers, the murders, everything. I was getting an idea as to what it was I was dealing with. The stuff about the dark web, the strange laptop, and the phone numbers. I arrived home, heartsick as hell. My friend was murdered today, and I couldn't stop it. Maybe if I had never grabbed the computer from the cafe, he'd still be alive. Maybe if I hadn't been so stupid, I could have handled this whole thing differently, and he wouldn't be dead right now. To top it off, I realized I left my phone at the bloody scene. I groaned and threw my head back in the driver's seat. Now what? Well, my phone is near some cops and the EMTs. Maybe if I call, they'll believe I dropped it before they got there, and I won't get in trouble. I reached back and grabbed the burner phone out of the bag and started to dial my phone number when I suddenly had a thought. If the phone numbers were dialed somehow had something to do with the murders, that must mean... I grabbed the laptop out of the bag, my heart racing and body profusely sweating in fear. This whole thing was unreal. The fact that I was right in the middle of it was even worse. I clicked on the folder of the pictures of scenery from earlier. Again, my eyes scrolled through across the picture of the barbershop, then the forest. Finally, my eyes got to the picture of the cafe. Yes, the phone numbers in these locations have to somehow be tied together, but I didn't know how. Why was this happening? I was about to leave the folder, but then a small thumbnail at the end of the list of pictures caught my eye. I hovered the cursor over it and opened it up. With some cloud service, the image was revealed. My jaw dropped in utter horror. A picture of my house. I was looking at a picture of my front yard and home. I hadn't noticed this before. Why hadn't I noticed this? Over in the top corner was a link, one that opened up the full cloud folder from some email made up of more gibberish characters. This folder contained more pictures. Pictures that were very different from the others. No way, I shouted out loud, face contorted in anger and fear all at once. Pictures of me looking directly at the camera, others of my car. The last ones were me of sneaking into the crime scene at the cafe. That guy, that homeless-looking guy from the other day, and behind the ambulance. I have his laptop. He was watching me. How did he tie into these murders? My silent tirade was interrupted by the sudden sound of a jingle to my right. The phone was ringing in my passenger seat. I picked it up and peered at the phone number. I couldn't handle this anymore. I just couldn't take it. It was my own phone number. Grudgingly, I decided to swipe and answer the call. Who is this? I stammered. A gravelly voice answered from the other end. Spare change, sir?
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time. They say nothing dies on the internet. Comprised of electrons and intangibles. Common sense would tell you nothing lives there either. Common sense wasn't there. During a night fueled by flashing screens, caffeine, and whatever else they pack into those carbonated cans of pure adrenaline, we stumbled across something terrible. Our video game remained the same as every other night for the past 4 months. It's an FPS of sorts. There are a few dozen characters, none that are human, and all have their own abilities. I had my own set of teammates, the same for the past 4 months. We had chosen a bizarre lobby. We'd seen it for months, yet it had never been able to enter it. Then one night, it simply opened and stayed open. That doesn't happen except for private matches. Yet, it remained available for 2 hours until our entire group was ready to join as a team. The opponent was astonishingly bad. Sometimes they would simply run into walls for minutes at a time. Needless to say, we were winning. It was the last point of capture the flag mode. Eric and Panesh had finally pulled the opponent from their flag. John and Sherry had then flanked them and pinned them down. Koji and I had used some rather liberal applications of explosions to take advantage of a glitch and saunter atop a few buildings to the enemy's encampment. Having passed them, we simply dropped to the floor. Koji blew an opponent away in the act of mutually assured destruction, and I turned the last corner to the flag room. The game itself embraced a sort of neo-futurism. It's what you might imagine as the world of tomorrow if you lived in the 1950s, and tomorrow was 1993. Everything was metal. There were ray guns and flying saucers, and sort of industrialism that our society surpassed decades ago. Most importantly, there were no NPCs, and there were no humans. But in the flickering lights of the flag room, an old woman waited. I never saw her face. From what I understand, nobody ever does. She stood where the flag was. As if she had heard my character's footsteps, she slowly turned. And just as her damp, tangled hair slid from her face to allow our eyes to meet, the screen went blank. We were kicked out of the game, and I was greeted with the black lobby screen and a palette of colorful language. There were grievances, then the usual banter, and then we noticed a 7th user in our chat. Koji was the first to engage and received no response. I can't exactly remember what Eric said, but I think it was something with a lot of numbers mixed with letters. Panesh brushed it off as a glitch in the system, but when Sherry accused the stranger of harassment and intimidation, it responded. Why find kindness and joy in all? Waltz with pariahs, converse with old quacks, when you can bring them to the axe instead. Nobody responded. I can only assume they kept reading and rereading the message as I did. In our lack of response, I took the opportunity to send another message. Only when wizened to sickness poverty, and death, do you better judge life's next gruesome question. And then it repeated. And it repeated over and over, the words flying down the screen. Occasionally, one of my teammates attempted to interject, but their response simply buried under the blur of green text. This continued for 15 minutes, and eventually, we gave up. So we left one by one, and nobody had the energy to log into another lobby. I initially figured it to be a half-baked prank, some troll with nothing better to do than take a dig at strangers. But the next morning, I received a text from Panesh, a screenshot of the lobby taken at 3 a.m. After 12,000 repetitions of the same lines, a new one appeared. I know what you're thinking. What was on the website? What terrors did I find there? None. I found a password field there. The username was already filled out, which was nothing more than gibberish. Yeah, a bunch of lazy gamers wouldn't look too far into something like this. But the few things we could see on the website, well, they were puzzling. The website's creators listed her usual name, Sandy Marie Shelton. Sandy wasn't hard to find. At the age of 73, Sandy became one of those viral pariahs after making comments in a grocery store 2 days after her husband died. Her words didn't sit well with the social justice circles. That year, she lost her job in the cafeteria, something demanded by public outcry more as an expectation than a request. She scraped by with a blog and Social Security. That is, until the victim of her words sued for emotional damages. At the age of 74, she lost both the suit and her savings. At the age of 75, as her blog illustrated in detail, she lost her toy poodle to a pyometra she couldn't afford to fix. At the age of 76, Sandy Marie Shelton hung herself in the children's section of the local library. Her last blog entry consisted of only 5 words. We can all do wrong. Typical poor me story, as you might expect. The fact was, only the video and the death of Sandy's husband can be confirmed. The interesting part of Sandy's story had yet to come. When 3 years after her death, she made a website. This was 2 weeks ago, and my attention wandered to a new fear, new assignments, new games, until this morning when all that changed. I awoke to a text, and thus started the strangest morning of my life. Hey, I figured out the password. It's a cipher. Are you in? Yeah, check it out. You got any of that info on this lady? The stuff is about her is gone. Which stuff? Everything, dude. Would you care to know why I didn't believe in the supernatural until now? It was real, because some people were just particularly good at hoaxes. That was it. Would you like a psychic reading? Right now, you're wondering why the hell I logged into that website. How did I know? Because I'm wondering that too. Until yesterday, I didn't believe the supernatural was much of a testament to human ingenuity as a hidden power in secret lives. But you see, the world of ghosts and demons and monsters isn't opened by a turnstile. It's opened by a massive glass window. You don't take one quantum of horror when you experience the unbelievable. It shatters your world. It just shatters that window. And just like that, you believe everything at once. That happened to me yesterday. Now I'm exhausted. Not much of a surprise after all. I couldn't fall asleep, but I suppose we'll get to that later. For now, I'll tell you what happens when you enter the right password into the wrong website. For if you are not such a monster, then you soon will be. That was it. That was what got us in. To be honest, I had read the words. I might have reconsidered entering them, but I didn't. I simply copied and pasted what Eric had given me. It was during lunch break yesterday that I typed in the password for the first time. Eric, Panesh, Sherry, John, and I all joined in on some Skype. And even though Eric sat beside me, Koji lived in Japan. So to nobody's surprise, our lunch break didn't coincide. When the website opened, a monotonous beep, the same pitch as that you might hear at the start of an emergency broadcast, droned on. The old woman sat there. She wore a dress, more tattered and tarnished bed sheets than garments, and leaned back into a rusted folded metal chair. Both gnarled and knobby hands covered her face. Behind her, broken planks and shingles cluttered the floor as light spilled in from a hole in the roof and a half-open doorway. On the floor behind her, flies clustered around her toy poodle. It lay motionless and rotting in the corner. The long tone continued through the speakers, and it seemed more picture than video, except that when you got close enough to the screen and squinted real hard, you could almost see the woman's hands trembling. It was about as creepy as I expected. I told Eric, but as he told me, that wasn't all. When he scrolled down, we came across one open line. Subscription. Behind it was a field you could see entering an email, and perhaps even a phone number. Yet Eric told me that it wouldn't accept an email or a phone number. It took your full name. A lot of people have told me I have trouble focusing. Some doctors have suggested that I have severe ADHD. This tangent may be a good example, I suppose, but I swear anyone could have missed what was happening at the peripheral of the computer monitor. It wasn't just me. If I had noticed, I wouldn't have put my full name into the field. Nobody else knew my middle name. Nobody else could have done it, which is why I did. I thought it wouldn't matter. I never hit enter, and it wouldn't work without processing something, right? Erica only told me after I entered the name, just within the field on the image where the woman sat. She was now moving. Her head had scrolled out of the screen, but her hands gesticulated madly. Her hair fluttered, and despite its soaked and molded appearance, even floated off the table. Her voice gurgled through the speakers as she derived about law, order, morality, and justice. And beside her, the poodle was standing frozen, its black beady eyes staring directly at the screen. I wrenched at the mouse from Eric and scrolled upward, but the second the scrolled screen over the woman's neck, the speakers immediately returned to the drawn-out beep. Her hands immediately returned to her face, and her dog immediately returned to decay. The mouse wouldn't stop shaking in my hand. It took near a minute for me to simply scroll back down and allow the woman to return to her speech. We listened to her. Her words didn't frighten me, nor did her movements. Everything came pretty much as you would expect from a lunatic who believed they went through what this woman claimed. It was how long she continued that concerned me. It was how her movements never repeated themselves. It was how, with every minute passed, I grew more and more fearful that this was not a recording. Even now and then, I would scroll up. Without fail, the screen would return to that continuous beep. The frozen image would reappear. With 3 minutes before our lunch break, Eric said he had another surprise for me. He scrolled down to the subscription field, moved the mouse over, and hit the button labeled subscribe. I had forgotten to delete my name. The words that came out of my mouth earned a few stern reprimands. I knew they would, but I didn't care. "What the hell did you just do?" I kept screaming at Eric as he laughed through it all. My tantrum lasted a few seconds until I piped down. Something had knocked all the words from me. It wasn't shame. It wasn't the words of the two teachers who scrambled over to protect the virgin ears of the students, uncorrupted by PG-13 movies. It wasn't even Eric who tried to direct my attention upward. It was the sound of the door closing. It came from the speakers. I scrolled back up and saw Eric's last surprise. The door behind the chair had closed, and both the woman and her dog were gone. Eric and I met up after fifth period. On consideration, it was really more Eric chasing me down and apologizing profusely. He just couldn't help himself. He kept saying through cracked smiles and broken laughter. And I realized I already knew that. I wasn't surprised, and quite frankly, I had kept him as a friend since 4th grade. It was a bit more logical to blame myself for keeping him around than it was to blame him for simply being him. Eventually, I caved, and we laughed off the entire experience. At least we'd be in good company, he said. He had signed up Panesh, John himself, and Sherry too. Koji apparently hadn't been included, seeing how it wouldn't accept the translation into the American alphabet. And there was nothing that could be done. Eric explained, as literally nobody knows how to Japan on these keyboards. School finished without a hitch. The group collectively agreed to go and hold on game night. People complained of headaches and homework, but really, I think everyone was either rattled or flat out pissed off at Eric. Come yesterday evening, I had mostly forgotten about the website. Our family had dinner as usual. I finished my homework as usual. I answered questions about school that I could answer. I answered questions about my behavior that I could not. As creepy as yesterday was, I didn't expect there to be more to this story. I was just sitting on my bed, documenting everything that I could and fall asleep. All lights were off in the house, and everything was quiet. It was a cool fall night, perfect temperature in a silent room. But whenever I was shutting my eyes, and I was just about to doze off, a little dog barks outside my door. My friend Eric hadn't been right. Everyone really, should have seen the signs. I suppose he'd been off for some time. But at the start of the school week, his wide brown eyes darted about. He spent half the day whirling around as if he'd seen or heard something. He was afraid, and that was one of the few things I don't think Eric has ever been. I don't blame him. It had been a week since we logged onto the website, broke the password, and brought the after images of the old woman into our lives. Initially, I deemed them hallucinations. But after watching her from the corner of the screen, I can't shake the feeling that she's been watching us from the corner of our eyes. 3 days ago, I thought I saw her frail silhouette standing outside the bathroom door, both hands covering her face. When I fell back against the radiator, she was gone, and not a trace of her remained. Until I crept forward and out of the corner of my eye, I saw the reflection in the mirror, with both hands over its face. That's how she is, I guess. She appears in flashes, never in focus, and she whispered. She whispered encouragements of theft, of abuse, of murder. Looking back now, I see that Eric must have heard them the loudest. At school, everyone tired of Eric's mutterings, that is, until yesterday, when his paranoid glances settled into an empty, distant gaze. His murmur suddenly became calm and coherent. He said when the woman had effects on the real world, doors opened. Footprints appeared. Radios and televisions screeched static. That everything fell into place for him. Personally, I think this world shifted 2 nights ago. When we logged onto our game server for the last time as a whole, everyone held their words. Responses were short, and we finished a mere 3 rounds in silence before deciding to call our last match. Seems that nobody had gotten much sleep. Our last skirmish started much like the previous 3, but as the game continued, Eric became agitated. He refused to run into buildings, insisting upon sniping from the various perches sprinkled around the arena. Yet he never fired a single shot. I'm not even sure he looked down from the sky. Every time I checked on him, he had moved to a new discreet location, weapon pointed straight up. This couldn't have lasted for long. Being a team elimination match, that is. John and Sherry both knocked themselves and 3 opponents out. Koji stumbled into a proximity mine after eliminating 2 enemies. Panesh took a headshot. I would like to say I went out in a glorious fashion, charging against a barrage of fire. Well, I fell off a roof instead. So initially, there was Eric and 1 opponent, both skulking around and offering no hope for an endgame. When you die in this game, you follow your living comrades around from a third-person view. With only Eric remaining, the view hovered over him, switching cameras as he kept his sights skyward. Naturally, we protested. When at first he ignored our verbal commands, we tried typing them. Eric, dude, go find them now. Or just blow yourself up, dude. No. Eric, damn it, stop it. Nah, down 3. Cut the leet BS and finish this now. Perhaps we might have continued hammering away at our keyboards. Perhaps we might have called his cell, but we didn't. Because just then, the camera spun over a shadow lurking behind his character. The view rotated, and Eric's character slid out of view. But just as it did, the shadow approached from off-screen, and I swear as it did, I saw the silhouette was a human. I saw its long hair flutter, and 2 hands drop away from its face. I've never heard anyone scream the way Eric did. It went on for minutes as we pled him to stop. Sherry, Panech, and Koji all logged off without farewells. and when he finally quieted, we heard only his heavy panting through the microphone as John sent one frantic message after another. Eric, hey, you all right? Eric, dude. I'm fine. Eric. Yep. What's with the name change? Several minutes passed before he typed his last message. I'll see you tomorrow. Then he logged off. What the fuck? Yeah, I know. I'll talk with him tomorrow. Alright, let me know if he's okay. Come on, man. Suddenly, John logged off. But I didn't get the chance. I should have known something was wrong. The old woman had been appearing more and more frequently over the past week despite my best attempts to shut her out. Yet I didn't see her at all yesterday or today. And Eric was calm, composed, and stranger than ever. Yesterday, he hadn't spoken more than a few words with me. Said he figured it all out. Every question about the screaming, about the shadow in the game was met with absolute indifference. All I could get out of him about the old woman was that she started to change things. She would move objects around the room, topple over furniture, leave bare footprints on the carpet. Today, Eric didn't show up for school, and I decided to cut class late this morning. It wasn't until that I got a text from him. Got Sherry to cut and drive. Mind helping me load an old washer into our pickup? Why not? You might hear about what happened next. Probably not. Accidents generally don't make headlines. I'm still shaken. Honestly, I don't understand what I'm supposed to do, but talk, because right now, I can't feel anything. I didn't bother telling the cops. Who would believe it? The weird kid with long hair and a dark sense of humor finally snapped. That's the story everyone defaults to. Eric's request was partially true. An old washer was waiting for us at his house. With the efforts of Eric, myself, Eric's father, and Sherry, we managed to hoist the cement bottom hunk of metal into the flatbed and tie it down. Apparently, the washer suddenly stopped working, and being the technology savant of the family, they believed Eric's story that the circuit must have finally blown. But when I loaded the machine, I noticed that the power cord had been partially cut, close enough to the adapter to go unnoticed unless it was bent. I showed it to Eric, and he shrugged. Junk was junk, he said. When Sherry tried to punch in the address into her phone, Eric snapped at her. Apparently he knew the directions better than even the phone would. So we shrugged it off and let him guide us through the back roads, to the highway, and finally onto the freeway, going the wrong direction. I didn't know the way, but Sherry insisted upon turning around. Eric finally conceded that he might have turned us the wrong way. He wanted to stop at the 7-Eleven about 10 miles away for a Slurpee. As frustrating as being misled may have been in other circumstances, that was the most Eric thing that Eric had done in a week. Sherry and I shared some relief in that. We drove on. I tend to get distracted. People have told me that I have ADHD. I often forget things. I often don't notice things, so it only makes sense that I missed what Eric was doing. He had been sitting in the back. He had offered to sit in the back. The rear window was pulled down. Eric said he preferred it that way. He never had before. The pickup slid to the left and then to the right on the expressway as Sherry darted past a school bus. And at some point during that pass, Eric must have climbed out of the rear window and swung himself onto the flatbed. 2 loud pops rang out, and something in the truck shifted. Metal groaned against metal. Eric, what the hell are you doing? Sherry screamed. That was when I whipped around and saw him pocketing a knife he used to cut the tie-downs. Shoulder pressed against the washing machine. He steadily pushed it to the end of the flatbed, where a thin metal lip prevented it from toppling to the screaming asphalt below. The pickup jolted as Sherry hit the brakes. Eric rocked back for a moment as I looked forward to the driver's seat. Slow. Stop. Slow. He might fall. As I swiveled my gaze back to Eric, for just a moment I saw her. The old woman knelt by Eric's leg, both hands away from her face, both hands toiling at something. But when the center of my vision snapped to Eric, the woman disappeared, and all I could see was Eric reversing his momentum into the metal frame of the washer and sending it rolling off the edge of the pickup. A metallic crash rang out as the washer shot backwards towards the school bus. Brakes skidded, rubber squealed, and Eric turned to me with pleading eyes. Then he disappeared. The police later told me the power cord separated from the plug and tangled around his ankle. Him and the washing machine tumbled together, sliding along the pavement in a trail of brown dust and red mist. The school bus swerved. Its front tires narrowly missed the washing machine and sucked Eric's body under. His lifeless form bent in ways I know a living being never could. He disappeared behind it, the washing machine rolling to the median, with its cord still attached to one severed leg. That's what I saw, at least. According to the police report, nobody really saw anything but Eric ramming the washing machine until it carried him into the oncoming bus. I initially tried to tell him about the old woman. I was immediately recommended head to the hospital for a psych assessment. My parents didn't care for that, but had quite a few questions. I didn't give them much about what had been happening. I didn't bother giving them much about anything. And if I was being honest, I don't really feel like writing anymore. There's nothing left to say. I'm not even thinking about Eric anymore. I'm thinking about how my parents are having early dinner at a friend's house. How the house is quiet and empty, and how my bedroom door has suddenly started opening on its own. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.